Gal.
Hey guys, and welcome to Kunai, a anime podcast under the Gal group. We haven't done an episode in a while, only because, well, I was sick. Can't blame me, I was sick. You might hear some coughing. I'll try my best to edit it out. But as always, we have Will.
As always.
I'm
Will. That's
as
right.
always. Will, today, what are we going to be talking about?
We are going to be talking about Sakurasou no Pet na Kanojo, or otherwise known as the Pet Girl of Sakurasou.
Yes, exactly. The Pet Girl of Sakurasou. Before we get into the disclaimer, there's a little bit of a pre-disclaimer. You can actually watch this legally on High Dive. I'll be honest with you, that's how I watched it. I did have some issues because it was kind of flickering between English dub and the Japanese dub, so I had to kind of constantly go back. But you can watch it on High Dive. I originally watched it on Crunchyroll, and we're going to go into the disclaimer. For you new folks, Kunai is a monthly anime discussion podcast under the Gal Network. Due to the nature of discussion, we can't avoid spoilers of the show to be discussed. For those shows that are based off an existing piece of work, whether it's manga, light novel, or some other media form, we're not going to be covering the source material for those, but we might do on our new manga and comics podcast known as Super Zero. So you can go and check that out as well at getlifepodcast.com. If you'd like to recommend a show for us to watch and make an episode of Kunai, leave a suggestion on our Discord. Go to getlifepodcast.com/Discord. It's a new Discord community, and we're trying to build it up again. We'd love it if you guys join. Big thanks to our sponsors, Sugoimon and Crunchyroll, and obviously big thanks to High Dive for actually having this show on their service, even though they're not sponsoring the show. Well, I think we should kind of get right into it. As a general overview, The Pet Girl of Sakurasou is a romantic comedy anime based off the light novel written by Hajime Kamoshida, the author of Bunny Girl Senpai, directed by Atsuko Ishizuka, who also directed No Game No Life. This anime was animated by the legendary JC staff, one of my favorite studios, and it was done in their heyday, in my personal opinion, and they're the same studio that has worked on Toradora, Maid-sama, Heneko, Food Wars, Danmachi, as well as many other great anime. It's a 24-episode season, began airing in fall 2012 alongside Chunibyo, My Little Monster, and Psycho Pass. Safe to say there wasn't much competition in that space for rom-com anime other than Chunibyo and My Little Monster, but they weren't really that big in comparison to this show. I would really like to know, Will, your first impressions, because I know mine's going to take a while, and I really just want to know yours, just in case I need to bounce off that.
All right, so, well, no, I'll keep mine kind of short and simple then, since you, it obviously sounds like you have a lot to say about it. I mean, so this is now, the fourth time I've actually watched the show, if that kind of says anything off the bat there. I first saw it was shortly after it came out. I remember my first impressions of the show was simply, it's like, wow, this is kind of different for a high school setting. That was the kind of it's like, I kept saying, it's not your normal rom-com. And, now upon my fourth viewing, I'd say it's more than an above average rom-com, but I think, going in as someone, if I'm thinking in the same mindset of someone who might be watching it for the first time now, that's probably how they're going to view it. They're just going to view it as a solid above average to very good rom-com when it comes down to it.
Okay, that's quite interesting. It's interesting that you didn't mention that it's one of the best rom-coms out there, because when you check online, it's often regarded as one of the best.
I'm not going to actually disagree with that. I love the show. I really do. I don't know. It's just, I watch so many rom-coms and things like that. And I'm the type of person that as long as I've been watching anime, I forget more than I remember. So it's one of those things, if I'm ever looking for inspiration and I do a Google search for, best rom-coms in anime, and it comes up on the list, I'm like, oh yeah, that is a great show. But it's never one that at first I just, think of to tell people about.
Okay, that's quite interesting, actually, to be fair with you. I kind of had a similar experience to you, and in fact, this anime was my first simulcast ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I got into anime in the summer of 2012, and this came out in the fall. So I got into it in 2012. I was severely depressed. My boy Daniil Senpai, who we mention a lot on this podcast, we know him as the anime guru, he suggested that I watch Toradora. And at this time, I was still a young weeb, a weeblet, as some people would say. I was seeking Daniil's suggestions, and this anime anime was one of his suggestions, because he was like, there's this new anime coming out. It's being made by the same people as Toradora, JC staff. I think you'd enjoy it. He didn't know what the anime was going to be like. I don't think he had read the light novel or the mangas or anything like that. So he didn't know, but he knew it was being made by the same studio and that, you know, I might like the artwork or the music or whatever. He's just basing it off trailers at this point. This anime was one of his suggestions, I think, after watching Haganai, and this show was simulcasting, and in fact, like I mentioned, it was my first simulcast anime, and it was so long ago, Will, that I can't remember much, but I do remember the bright and vibrant color palette, and it kind of made me want to watch the show week to week, right? I was very new to that whole waiting for an anime. A lot of the anime I had watched at that time, I just binged through it during the summer, so this was kind of a show that gave me hope week to week, if that makes sense. And I think when the season finished, I proceeded to binge it again and then seek out more JC staff stuff, because I was like, you know what, this kind of solidified it as a great studio for me as an anime fan. And I was discussing the show with friends, right? I remember having discussions with Daniil and the rest of my sort of friend group in high school, because I was a high schooler when this came out, so I could kind of relate to it from that aspect. So it was just very interesting. It was kind of almost one of my first discussions around anime, and would kind of serve to be the pillar or one of the pillars that kind of supported kunai. It made me fall in love with anime. Learning how to talk about anime, you know, it was kind of the building blocks for what became kunai, and it's one of the reasons we're talking about this anime today. By the time this episode goes out, it's going to be kunai's 10th anniversary, and if it wasn't for this anime and for animes like Toradora and Haganai, I don't think I'd consider myself as an anime fan, and at least not to the point where we'd be doing an anime podcast 10 years later.
It's kind of neat how, you know, a show like this and, you know, a studio like JC Staff kind of like, you know, can influence, you know, potentially a generation of people. Like, you know me, I like a lot of JC Staff stuff too, and, you know, we've talked about it off the podcast, you know, plenty of times and everything. You know, it's not, I'm not going to put it as one of the you know, my early, you know, I guess you say shaping of, you know, my anime fandom, but then again, I got started in a different generation. But it's definitely a studio and a style that I have grown to, you know, really like, and there's, you know, several of their shows are, you know, in my top, you know, even like 15, 25, 50 and things like that. And I was, one of the things I was going to bring up too was the kind of, you know, very colorful, you know, design of this show. It's not quite that pastel level like we've talked about in other shows. Like, I don't remember, I think it was My Love Story we talked about, where I really enjoyed the kind of pastel colors that was in that. This is kind of similar to that, but not quite that strong. But one thing, you know, bringing up about like color and art design with this show, that I think it's kind of interesting how color and light actually plays a lot of importance in this show, because it's almost like a representation of all the characters all have their nice bright clothing, and, you know, their colorful school uniforms, and, you know, some of the characters put on, you know, that bright cheerful personality to match it too, but inside they all have their own struggles, their own worries, their own concerns, and things that they're all trying to work through in this series. And I don't know if you noticed it, but it's one of those things that as the show goes, if you notice, a lot of the scenes that even happen during the daytime are your more lighthearted and funny scenes, and then when they shift into even in the nighttime, that's when things become a little bit more serious. Not that they're dark or anything, but it's when like the characters tend to have a lot more serious conversations with each other and things like that too. So it's kind of juxtaposed to the actual color design of the show and the lighting to what's actually going on with the show in each given episode too. And
I think that's a wonderful thing, and just to kind of add on to that as well, it's also the fact that there's the season changes, the weather also affects it a bit more. You kind of get that more dreary weather when it is the more dramatic moments within the anime. And you're completely right on that. And I know we normally talk about art style and animation towards the end of kunai, but I wanted to kind of bring that up because the art style itself, Will, although it's kind of pastel-y, not as much as a show like My Love Story, but it's very interesting because the art style itself is not unusual for an anime of this time period, right? Whether you're talking about Toradora or a lot of the other shows.
This is one of those shows you look at it and you could tell this is a JC Staff show.
Exactly. And not just that, you could tell that it's a show from 2012, right? It kind of feels like that. Not that it's an insult, but I think there was this period of time between 2008 and 2015 where a lot of the anime kind of just felt the same. Not in terms of story, but just in terms of art design. And I don't know, it felt a bit more cheery than it is kind of now. And I think that's probably because trends have changed. Around that time period, you did get quite a lot of romantic drama, romantic comedy anime, and now it's kind of more shonen focused. But it's interesting because the colors set the show apart from something like Heneko or Golden Time. The characters and the backgrounds feel like they're painted in pop colors, right? It just feels like it's a painting. And it's very interesting because obviously that kind of reflects on Mashiro as a painter and things like that. It feels like everything, as you mentioned before, is just masterfully crafted through its art style. It's interesting because it's like, I don't know how to explain it. It feels like a dreamscape, right? Like they're in a painting or in a land that's not real. Almost similar to No Game, No Life. Almost, right? Not as much because that's more vibrant. It's weird because it's like isekai coloring for a romance anime. And it's interesting to look at it that way because it doesn't distract from the story or the dialogue, which I do enjoy. Because sometimes your art style kind of can be a bit overpowering and the colors can be like, oh, what the hell's going on here? But in this case, it just really works.
I don't really have much to add on to that. I don't want to disagree with any of that because I do agree with it.
I'm sorry for kind of bringing art style and animation that early on, but I think what you said was just such a great point, and it was a small point for me anyway, so I thought might as well get it out of the way.
And obviously that's nothing to apologize about either. We break our own rules all the time.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate that. We make our own rules. Speaking of our rules, and we'll get back onto the actual structure of the show, I want to know, Will, what was your sort of favorite moments and episodes? And I know in terms of your notes, we kind of discussed this before the recording, your notes are quite...
Oh, Lord have mercy.
I don't know what the word is. It's quite structured in the sense that you've gone through each episode. So I'd imagine pretty much all of the episodes are your favorites, or do any of them stick out?
Oh, man. Let me just look through my notes here, because like you said, I've got pages of pages of each episode. This is definitely a show that you can just dive into and pick up different things anytime that you watch it. So episode 10.
Okay.
Episode 10, where
it's the cultural festival.
Sorata, where he's kind of looking at all the people that he's surrounded by in Sakura Hall, and how they're all like so talented in their own ways, and he's like, still having self-doubts about himself and what he's able to do, and like he doesn't really feel like he's anything all that special, and he has that thought to himself where he says, wow, working around talented people is like really difficult, and like they're thinking about what their presentation's going to be for the upcoming festival. Yeah, so that what I thought was kind of an important moment for him, just because it's one of those things that even though this is at episode 10 during the series, you're like, wow, episode 10, that's pretty deep in, but this is also a 24 episode show, so we're not even at the halfway point, and then you kind of see how he grows from this point on through the rest of the series. In episode 13, when Mashiro herself, like how she up to this point, she's kind of struggled with just knowing how to be for lack of better words, a functioning human, you know what I mean? And she starts to realize that, she kind of has like feelings, and not just feelings of, like simple love or anything, but maybe even like jealousy. She's actually starting to be concerned about, what Sorata's doing, and Sorata, and like when he helps her to make the bento, and she's, paying attention to what he's doing and looking at him and just thinking about him, things like that. And then people actually start noticing a change in her as well. It's not just her noticing it in herself, but the other people around her noticing the changes, and she keeps like questioning. She's like, I don't understand, what this is I'm feeling. I don't understand why I'm feeling this way, because all of her life, she's just been told like how great she is and what a talented artist she is and all that type of stuff, but she doesn't, she's never had true like affection or care put her way. So it's all still really new to her.
Would you say there's some additional moments as well, or?
Yeah, if you want me to keep going, sure.
Definitely.
Of course, when it came time for them to do their actual presentation during the festival, like how they all ended up having to work together to make their game, and they were, you know, problem solving through the whole thing, like figuring out like the proper levels of like the voice activity and how to make the special attacks. And then when they actually do the presentation, they realized that there's some things they might have missed or forgotten about, and they had to give it that little extra, you know, kind of oomph to get the finished project. And then not only themselves, but all the rest of the kids at the school realizing how they were all able to come together and get it done. And they actually ended up getting into it and cheering everyone on. And like kids in the audience who were like, man, this is really silly and I don't know why, but I'm really having fun with this. And, you know, like I said, and really getting into it and cheering everyone on. So that was obviously really nice. I'll stop there for now because the rest of the stuff that I really liked obviously came at more or less at the end of the season or the series, I should say. So I want to hear, you know, what some of your kind of likes and everything were going as the series built up.
Sure. For me, it's very difficult to actually decide which are my favorite episodes because I'm a big fan of the more dramatic and romantic plot lines. And with the way that the show is structured, we seem to get them scattered every sort of 3 or 4 episodes. There's always a dramatic arc, right? There's always that sort of confession of love or things like that. So I kind of enjoy those moments. I will say this, I really did enjoy the school festival and the whole Nyanpolon scenes, how it was building up to Mashiro and, you know, experiencing what it means to fall in love, you know, towards the end where they're at the airport and stuff, and the start of Rita and Ryonosuke's romance. I thought that was quite interesting. I also quite liked, as you mentioned before, with riling up the school and getting them like hyped to sort of express their love to whoever or to say their emotions or to kind of just bring out what's inside of them in that very moment, because that happens multiple times within the show, right? That main time with Nyanpolon, and then there's also towards the end when they're trying to make their case to keep Sakurasou still there, right? So they get the students riled up, and it's quite interesting because it's like almost they've proved themselves at the Nyanpolon arc, and you would have expected that more people would have more respect for Sakurasou. It's just interesting how they kind of almost forgot about it when it came time to like signing the petitions and stuff. So I thought that was a little bit weird, but otherwise I did quite like it.
I would say that whole petition arc too was really strange too, because I noticed that too. I was, because that went over the course of like a few episodes too. I said, why do they still need more signatures? I said, is there not anyone in the school that hasn't signed it at this point? Are they really not getting enough?
Yeah, and especially when Ryonosuke designed the website, and you'd think that, they already got it, but I think they needed like 2/3 of the school to sign it, and I didn't think they got enough. They probably just got their classmates.
How big is this school?
It's a huge school. It's connected to university, so I think it is quite a big school. It has to be, right? But yeah, it was interesting, and I will say this, I'm gonna sprinkle in some episodes that I didn't like as well, and forgive me, Will.
Okay.
I didn't like episode 19, which is Alien's First Love. No, it's not. Sorry. It's Home is Where Sakurasou Is. It's when when Sorata recalls his first moments in Sakurasou. The reason why I didn't like it is because I actually hate episodes like that. I hate episodes where you recall and recap it and just reuse animations, right? Or reuse scenes. It's kind of like, how you watch like an American sitcom in the 90s, right? Whether it's Seinfeld or Friends or like something like How I Met Your Mother. And then they go back in time and they're like, oh, remember the time? And then bam, they show you all of these scenes. And I'm like, I hate this because it's like a reuse of assets. Clearly they've done it for time. There was some new content in episode 19. So it's not really an episode to skip, but I do find it a bit odd that we have all of this character development right towards the end of the show, especially during a high drama scene when you kind of almost first find out that Sakurasou is being demolished, and then you go back in time. I found it a bit like filler, which doesn't make sense because it helps to drive the story. Filler doesn't do that, right? So I'm very conflicted on this episode. Another episode that I liked and didn't like was, for the same reasons, was the graduation episode.
Which one? Because the graduation ceremony ceremony like took place over basically like the last 3 episodes?
So it is episode 23. So it's literally the second to last episode. And half of that episode is basically a recap. And I'm like, I don't want to see, like, in theory, you could skip that. You could skip like half the episode because it's like talking about their experiences and the time when we went to the pool or the time where we had hot pot or whatever. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, we've already had a recap episode 3 episodes before. Why do we need another? I understand it's sort of to tie up the show. I think episode 24 does a better job of that. I get it. It's needed to a certain extent. I just think they could have done more with that. They could have made it more dramatic. It was too sappy for me, and I do like those sappy moments, but it was like, I've just seen this, you know what I mean? And I think maybe I'm saying this because I'm binge watching it. If I was going back to the time where I was watching it week on week, this scene would have made me cry, because then I would have recalled those, you know, because it's a 24 episode anime. It would have been going on for 24 weeks, right? So, okay, yeah, the season started in October and this sort of ended in March, right? So there would have been some time, but I think rewatching it, that episode isn't really needed. And I think it kind of annoyed me a little bit.
I'm not a big fan of recap episodes and things like that, but at the same time, I kind of understand part of it, you know, for this, in these purposes. It wasn't just as a filler thing, I don't think. I think it was also, you know, like member berries, where it's like, remember this, remember when this happened, oh, this is great, and now these times are passing us by, I'm gonna be so sad, but I'm also happy, but I'm sad, but I'm happy.
It's cringe. I'm sorry, I have to say this. I remember when I was watching it initially, because obviously I was graduating from high school around that time. I kind of felt the same way. But then now watching it, I'm like, wow, okay, that's a bit... can we skip this? Can we get to the good bit? But back onto the point, in terms of favorite episodes, episode 21, and those kind of final few episodes are my favorite, despite the whole speech in the graduation. Episode 21 was one of my favorites because of the drama, right? Finding out that Aoyama and Kanda have failed, you know, and the rain is pouring.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so that's what I thought you were getting, because it's like, whenever you watch a series like this, you're just kind of always expecting everything's gonna work out, they're gonna succeed, they're gonna overcome, you know, their difficulties, everything. But no, that's something that's really special, I think, about this show, is that a lot of the characters end up failing. They end up making, you know, like they think that they're like, you know, they're putting forth their best, you know, and everything, which they are and everything, but then you still come to find out that they don't succeed, they don't pass, someone else, you know, gets what they want, you know, before them, you know. So, but I think it just really shows that, you know, obviously, I mean, it's, for lack of better words, their growth, because even though that they put forth all this energy and effort, and sure, at first they're dejected, but if you also notice too, none of them ever give up. They're like, all right, time to go back to the drawing board and start this over.
But that's
again.
the thing. There were points in which they were going to give up, and I kind of felt that moment, you know, when Aoyama is crying in class, right? She's not saying anything, not even like kind of acting up the tears. Literally, tears are just rolling down her face. She has no emotion. She walks outside, not smiling, not doing anything. She's keeping that sort of poker face. It was very heartfelt for me, standing in the rain, and it almost felt like her dreams had even crushed at this point, and that she's a broken person, right? Coming to terms with her emotions and her real feelings, and the fact that she used her excuses to hide that hurt. And I love this episode, and I love that moment because it hit me in the feels, right? Since I watched this show for the first time up until now, I've always kind of related to this scene so much. The crying, the fact that she felt worthless, the loneliness that comes with not being true to your own emotions.
She has a thought where she's like, I don't deserve praise.
Yeah.
She thought that since she couldn't succeed, that she didn't deserve, you know, her friends and her family, you know, telling her you did good.
Exactly. And I think also that might be because of the fact that she can't afford to fail because everything is riding on it, right? Because her parents gave her an ultimatum. I'm glad that Kanda was there as a support, although his methods are a bit aggressive. I'll talk about that a little bit more when we discuss characters. But he was right in telling her to face it head on and to continue despite all of the failures, right? And I will be honest with you, when I saw this scene now, I looked back at my own life. I remember there were times in my life where I felt like I'd wasted my life, like her, especially during COVID. I kind of felt like I was wasting my time with this podcast and with all of the podcasts, and I was this close to actually stopping the podcasts because I felt, well, in 13, 14 years, how much have I achieved? What have I achieved? And I'm kind of glad that I continued moving on from that point, only because because in terms of the podcast, the growth has been really exponential since COVID, and I'm very thankful for that.
It's funny that you're bringing that up, because that's what I was gonna say though. Like this is why I don't think that Aoyama was actually going to give up, because I think one of the reasons she was so hard on herself and not thinking she was good enough to deserve the praise, I think a lot of that was more coming from the outside sources, like how her parents, even though you don't ever meet her parents, you just kind of like hear it through the conversation, how her parents are basically saying if you don't succeed, you're gonna have to come back home. So I think that was kind of the back of her head, and kind of an outside influence of you need to give up, or like how when it was showing her with the other students who were working on trying to become voice actresses and things like that, how at first they were like, oh, you did such a good job, yada yada, but then when like I can't remember what it was during this the show where she ended up having a couple mistakes and all that type of stuff, and then some of them just kind of like shut down around her. Granted, it was kind of in passing, it was really short, quick scenes, but at the same time, like, that had to be kind of dejecting to her too, for all this time that she's been saying, you're doing such a good job, keep working at it, and then as soon as she does make a mistake, everyone's either like, well, she's done. And that kind of affected her to herself.
And it's an interesting point, and I really do want to say to the audience really here is that these sort of pivotal moments and failures in life really do help you move and improve as a person. And I think if you treat it as a point to learn from, it's going to help you out a lot. And it's okay to cry, and it's okay to be upset. But if you don't kind of continue moving forward despite all of that, then it would be all for nothing. Because I know that Aoyama was constantly, as you mentioned, she was always focused on this goal, and she was thinking, well, these 2 years, it's almost as if, what was the point? It's all done for nothing because I didn't succeed. And I think that if she did give up, then yes, she would be right. It would have been all for nothing. And I think even then, the teacher, the sensei herself, was like, look, you shouldn't see it as you've wasted these 2 years, because you've grown a lot, you've gained a lot during these 2 years. And I think that's obviously very, very important. It's one of the main reasons why I do love those last couple of episodes as well. I also kind of loved the episodes where you see more of Ryunosuke and Rita, especially episode 24, where you kind of see everyone's sort of final moments, and you find out that Jin and Misaki got married, although in secret, and the fact that Misaki bought a house next door. And I'm thinking, how rich is Misaki? I know she's like a popular anime creator and stuff like that, so she probably does have enough money to buy the house next door. But
yeah, she's a popular mangaka. She
Yeah.
has made short games. She had made short animes. Like, she was actually she was published before she was ever even at Sakura Hall.
I kind of get it that she does have enough money to just buy the house next door. I thought that was kind of cute, the fact that she bought the house next door, and the fact that we got to see the new characters come in. And I do want to mention it a little bit. These new characters, they are quite interesting. Obviously, we don't get to see a lot of them in the anime, but the perverted boy, he's Hao Hao's brother, which I thought was interesting. The fact that there is that link there. And then there's Kana as well, who I will mention a bit later on, because she is quite an interesting character, and she kind of plays a little bit more in the light novel in comparison to the anime. But I'm kind of glad that episode 24 was done, and obviously it was done like that, and it kind of almost stopped the anime at that point, because of the fact that by the time this aired, basically it caught up to the light novel, so they can't really continue it on from there. That kind of maybe explains why there wasn't a second season, but it almost felt like it was self-contained, and I really did like that. And you got to see what kind of happened in the future as well. Everyone kind of did what they needed to do. The sensei clearly is in a relationship with the game designer guy. They're all trying their best as well.
We're talking about Chihiro Sensei and Kazuki.
Correct.
Because I really I like how Kazuki kind of like took Sorata under his wing a bit there too. So that
it was
kinda
interesting
cool.
because they're both from Sakurasou, and he thought that their ideas was good. And I think there was some contention where I didn't like him, and that was the moment where they offered Shiina a job as a game designer, as a storyboard artist and stuff. And the way he kind of explained it in like the final episode, where he was like, "Oh, I didn't know that they were going to offer Shiina a job." I'm like, okay, all right. It kind of felt a little bit tacked on.
Wasn't that because Sorata in his game presentation, he had Shiina do the art for him?
Correct. It kind of built into the story really well, and I was like, oh, so that's why he didn't get the job, clearly, and that they wanted to offer Shiina a job. I thought that really worked well. But then when he goes in and he was like, oh, actually, I didn't know that they were going to offer Shiina a job. I was like, okay, you didn't need that bit. I would have kind of wanted him to be a little bit of a villain, especially considering that at that point, we'd already kind of got the resolution for that part of the story. We'd already seen Sorata move on from that point, so we didn't really need the game designer guy to just come in and basically like apologize and say, it wasn't me that done it, it was my team or whatever. I thought that was a bit dumb, in my personal opinion. Will, do you have any other points on your favorite moments?
I really liked I think it was over winter break, episode 15, where everyone, was leaving and everything, but how the girls stayed with Sorata, and then like as Aoyama got to talking with his younger sister Yuko, she decided to actually help her studies to improve her grades so she could try to get into the same school as them. So just little sweet things like that. And then which I think it was the same episode where she also made the onigiri for Sorata. I just thought that was just a real nice kind of thing. Me, I love like slice of life type stuff, and that was just to me like that kind of slice of life kind of episode. It was just really nice and sweet to have a more condensed episode in the mix.
Yeah, if I may say about that episode, it was quite interesting as well, the way you kind of saw more of Aoyama's caring side and the fact she's caring for everyone. I did find it interesting that the mum, and this is such a trope in anime and I hate saying this, but the fact that the mum was like, oh, Sorata, we found your wife, like that kind of, that sort of trope, that sort of anime housewife trope.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was hilarious. It kind of reminded me in like Oremo, the childhood friends. It kind of reminded me like that. And even though they're not childhood friends, right? Because one of them's from Osaka and the other one's from, different place in Japan. But it was very interesting. The effort that she takes to make the onigiri the same way his mum used to make it. It was just like, I think they're from Fukuoka. So it was like learning that and taking that on board. I thought that was very interesting. And it kind of almost plays into this, I wouldn't say love triangle because it's very clearly weighted in a certain direction, but it kind of almost plays into this faux harem, and it kind of sort of drives the point that some people will be like, oh yeah, best girl, this and that.
There's definitely, I would say, a tinge of a love triangle. That's for sure. So that's actually one of my contentions with the show. But we'll get to that in a bit. But overall, and I know it's a real easy episode to get behind and talk about, which we've already talked about it. But for me, it's not actually episode 24, but episode 23. When they're actually, having the graduation ceremony, they had the little cherry blossom brooches made to represent, Sakura Hall, and then Misaki's speech when she was giving the graduation speech, from being, the top student and all that stuff. I loved her speech. I thought it was just, completely amazing, and like it really felt impassioned. The voice actor, nailed it and everything too, and like all the kids then were like, hey, you to the principals, like, you need to listen, you need to take this serious, you need to help save Sakura Hall. So if the season would have even ended there without even getting another season, I still think that would have been a great moment.
I agree with you as well, to be fair with you. I think though the reason why they included episode 24 was just to probably just end it off there at where the light novel ended and just kind of give us a little bit more closure in terms of what happened next. I really want to get into character discussions. I think that's where we're going to get the meat and potatoes of this episode. And I think we need to talk about Shiina last. I think we need to say
You want to talk about Mashiro last?
Correct. I do.
This could be difficult, but okay. All right, where do you want to start?
I want to start on like the more side characters, and then we'll focus on the main characters. So I want to focus on Jin and Misaki and their relationship, right? So I didn't like Jin to begin with. I thought he was a douchebag.
Same.
I thought, because, he's always going out there and sleeping with other women. And I'm like, dude, chill. Like, what the fuck? There's a girl that loves you. What the fuck are you doing?
Oh my God, dude. That's why I'm like, okay, you've got this girl. Like, number one, she's a babe. Number two, she's like a ray of sunshine in human form. Like, she talks about, like, she's open about how much she loves you. You've worked with her, since you were, before even coming to Sakura Hall. You've been working together, writing and making, like, anime and stuff together.
Family friends as well.
What is the big deal? Like, I don't get it. And then, like, when you come to find out that he even dated her sister, like, dude, why are you such a douche?
It's interesting, though, because you kind of think, why is he a douche? And I think it ultimately goes down to the fact that he feels feels he's not worthy for her, right? And even the sister says it. The sister's like, look, you're only dating me because you know in yourself you're not ready for Misaki, right? So it's almost as if the sister was like a nicotine patch, if that makes sense. I know that's a really shitty way to think about it, but it kind of felt like that. I kind of felt really bad for Misaki initially in the beginning, because from the get-go, you know, albeit in a very jovial way, when she gets rejected by Jin, she gets serious about her love, right? So she's very funny in the beginning, and she's like, oh, I love you, Jin, and this and that, even though she knows he's sleeping around, and she's still with him in that sense. But then she kind of gets serious when she's like rejected by him, and it's not really a real rejection, if that makes sense. It's more to say, look, I'm going to Osaka, you know, we'll see what happens then, and that kind of stuff. And clearly you kind of think, okay, why is he doing this? And I don't know how to explain it. It's like, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that lifestyle that he had before. I do respect the man he became, right? Because the moment he knew where he wanted his life to go, he was like, fuck it. I'm going to break up with all my girlfriends. I'm even going to go to the sister and say, look, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. You know, I'm in love with your sister, that kind of stuff. And he prepares everything towards the end, right? He buys her the necklace from the get-go because he knows, clearly he knows where he wants to go, right? He wants to be with Misaki. So he buys that necklace. He also buys her a ring, right? And he kind of fobs it off as, oh yeah, so that other guys don't chase you, right? But then he fills out the marriage license towards the end, right? And I thought that was really cool, because clearly he's just saying, look, I know I need to do this to get better, so that when we do eventually get married, I'm not falling behind you, because you're just so amazing, at least from a technical perspective. But you could tell in terms of a committed boyfriend and like a relationship, he's committed, right? The fact that he signed those papers, and I respect that. I mean,
and I hate to keep using the term douchey, but it's like, it's one of those things where he had to go kind of like his own way, his own form of self-discovery to realize that he was good enough for her in a way, because she already loved him for, you know, who he was and everything, but he decided to have all these other relationships and play the field and all that type of stuff, basically to see if his heart would still be with Misaki or not. And I know it's kind of bad when you think about it. It's like, so why did he, you know, potentially hurt all these other women in the process? So it's a double-edged sword, but I kind of understand it.
I think also at the same time, the other women that he was dating, I don't think that he had any sort of relationship with. I think it was just purely sexual, right? So I don't know.
I'm almost positive even like one of the like older women he was with was like,
she was married, I think.
When I think he's like in her apartment and talking on the phone to somebody, and how they're even talking about how the relationship is just purely sexual.
Mm-hmm. So I kind of think that his sexual partners know that, and they probably know that there is other women in the situation. So yeah, there's that about him. I will want to say this about Misaki, is that I really did appreciate the level of character development that she got. However, she as a character is very, very cliche. The fact that she's very bubbly and all of this kind of stuff, it's weird, because a lot of anime during this time period, and even before that, when you talk about rom-coms, there's always this character type. Whether you talk about in Toradora with a character like Minorin, who is basically the same character, they look exactly the same, their hairstyles are slightly different.
But you're right, like Misaki is a lot like Minorin. That's I totally see that.
She kind of looks like Minorin as well.
Comparison. Yeah, a little bit, but I don't like. I'm not gonna lie. I think Misaki's hot, and I never would have thought that about Minorin.
I think it's the hairstyle. The Minorin hairstyle just doesn't work. It's just a bowl cut, but regardless. So,
but also the always kind of cherry cheek like thing that they do with her,
and the fact that she's incredibly etchy at times, and you know, I thought that was quite funny. It is interesting in terms of her character that she is just basically an archetype that was found in a lot of different animes during this time period. I thought that was interesting, and I think that's probably, it may have been just a product of the time, the same with the light novels and whatnot. I also didn't like the fact that she got a lot of her character development right towards the end. I'm not a fan of character development mainly at the end of a show. I find it's almost, you kind of need to do it at the beginning, and that's an issue that I have with the structure of the show, because a lot of characters have this, right? Even Sorata. So it's like, it seemed a bit naff. It was just like, okay, at the beginning we kind of got our main character development from Mashiro and to some degree Aoyama, but with Misaki it was just like just right at the end, it just felt
I kind of see that a bit, but at the same time it's like, you know, a lot of the, you know, arcs and build up to the show, while not being about Misaki or developing her, she was still kind of like the glue holding it together, such as like them putting together the event for the culture festival and things like that, you know, and them helping her like cram to get things done at the last minute, you know, and everyone helping to pitch in.
I want to move on to Ryosuke and Rita, and this is the way that I've kind of formulated my notes. I've done them as pairings, right, which I thought was kind of cool, just so we can make this known. Ryosuke is voiced by Yui Horii, just to make that known for everyone. Ryunosuke, and I'm gonna say this from now, other than Mashiro, my favorite character is Ryunosuke, because in the show he starts off very mysterious. You don't see him until you kind of get a few episodes in, right? And yet he's got a lot of character development from the get-go. He's acting as Kanda's guru in the gaming space, and you also kind of learn a lot about him through Maid-chan, right? Because he created her. So I imagine that he has a similar traits to Maid-chan, or maybe Maid-chan has the traits that he wants. It was interesting because the fact that he created an AI with visuals of a maid that is clearly in love with him kind of reminds me of how Ainz in Overlord modified Albedo's code. So it's like almost he might be a little bit vain in that sense. I don't think he is, but I thought maybe I'll put that out there. Or he's incredibly lonely. And that's something that I was thinking about from the very beginning, right? He doesn't leave his room initially. He lets his hair grow long, and I'm probably assuming it's because he doesn't care, because he's living as a hikikomori. And Sorata does confirm this later on in the season when he gets to meet him for the first time, when he first arrives to Sakurasou. And it's very interesting, like Maid-chan cares for him, so it makes me feel that he wanted to feel loved, right? I don't know. He wants to feel loved and cared.
I think more for him, it was more of a trust issue. Like he just didn't trust a whole lot of people out in the world, you know?
Yes.
Because he also sees how like a lot of people who are creative are also taken advantage of.
Correct. And in the case of him, right, he was abandoned by his gaming team, or his game development team. It can also explain why he has a hard time with Rita initially, because there is that lack of trust, and he kind of barely interacts with anyone, and randomly a beautiful girl has taken interest in him. And I'll be honest, from my own personal experience, it's very overwhelming, right, when someone takes an interest in you, whether it's romantically or whether it's socially, and you just don't have a clue what's going on or how to deal with this from a social perspective, right? Especially someone like him who's kind of distanced himself from the rest of the world to the point where he was having Maid-chan speaking with others directly on his behalf. So I thought that was quite interesting, and you kind of see him grow slowly throughout the show and be more open. And by the end of the show, he goes out for meetings for like his game development in person, which I thought was, you know, it speaks wonders of him and his growth as a character. I imagine that he rarely interacts with people, maybe because of that trauma, because people left him, or maybe because of bullying and whatnot that's kind of led him to become a hikikomori. So it's interesting that he's in Sakurasou, because everyone in Sakurasou is there for a reason. They all have their own sort of, I wouldn't say character flaws, because I wouldn't say that's a flaw in himself, but I think that's something that he's having to deal with himself, right? As you mentioned in the beginning, well, everyone has their own struggles, and I think Sakurasou in itself is the dormitory is designed in a way to sort of get people out of that, which I thought was really nice. I also want to say I love how his relationship with Rita blossoms. It's like they're both inexperienced, and it's like a sort of sweet representation of first love, almost perfect in a way, yet quite awkward, as high school relationships tend to be. So I really did like that about him specifically. I want to know your thoughts on Ryunosuke.
I mean, you kind of nailed it all there and everything. So as someone like, you know, I was talking about this with some friends the other day, that people think that because like I talk about, you know, anime on a podcast with you, or you know, they see me on Twitter and things like that, they think that, you know, I must just be this like, you know, very outgoing person and everything, but I'm actually not. I'm very much the opposite. Well, and also being a teacher and everything too, you know, working with kids all day, every day, but I'm actually very much introverted, and it's like by the time that I even get home from work, like I'm just like mentally drained and ready to shut down. But again, that's also why I really get into things like anime and video games, and, you know, I want to talk about them and express my feelings about them and everything. So I can relate to Ryunosuke in the side of like kind of wanting to shut down and like only really talking to people online and like through messaging services. So that I kind of understand. I also can 100% understand like where he's coming from, like when Rita just outright gets in his face and starts like kind of like, you know, saying, hey, I like you. Why don't we get together? Why don't we go out? Why don't we go out on a date? You know, let's do something fun together. Because, you know, the few times I've been lucky enough to have anything like that happen in my life, I just second guess it the whole time. I'm like, they can't be serious. They don't really want to go out with me. This is all just a big joke.
It's interesting that you feel like that, because I kind of really do agree with you, because when I started this podcast, it was a way for me to talk about my interests, whether it was gaming, whether it was anime, or whatever it was. And if you met me in real life, I'm a completely different person. And I think that the podcast is almost like a true representation of who I am. And I'm kind of in this point of sort of bringing that into the real world, right? Showing off who I am in the real world and interacting with people in the same way I kind of interact in the podcast. And I think that's also a journey that Ryunosuke is kind of going through. It was interesting that you mentioned the whole Rita thing and sort of second guessing, and it kind of makes me want to lead onto my points on Rita. And man, oh boy, I remember back in the day hating Rita. I absolutely hated her.
Really?
I hated her. I don't know. I thought she was just really like, why are you here? You're here to take Mashiro away. And as I mentioned, Mashiro has always been my favorite character. So like, I was just against it. She felt like almost a villain. She's from this foreign country, England, but still, she just felt like a villain. And I didn't appreciate that. I felt that she was jealous for Shiina, right? And she was almost lazy, like in my opinion, because she wasn't improving her craft just because she thought, I'm never going to be good as Shiina. There's always this idea in each one of the characters that they feel inadequate, right? Whether it's Aoyama, whether it's Sorata, or even Jin, right? And of course Rita, but Rita comes in from the get-go as this character. I'm taking you back to England. That's the end of that. When she overcomes that, I kind of felt that she was incredibly relatable to me. And I only noticed this towards my sort of second viewing for Kunai. You know, there's many reasons why she's relatable to me. The first being that she's British, right? I'm British. I relate to her a lot, but also she feels inadequate at times. And I also feel like that sometimes, right? Especially around others who are more talented than me, or with people who have seemingly succeeded more in their lives than my own, right? And I look at certain things in my life, in the past especially, and I look at my own insecurities, and it's almost like I want to give up because I'll never be able to change certain things about me, right? Like my body image. Or one thing that I've been struggling with a lot recently is finding love. So I've kind of, especially recently in the past or whatever, I've kind of almost given up on that, right? And I kind of relate to Rita's struggle. And look, I know a lot of people don't like the fact that I'm quite vocal on Kunai, and I give my sort of personal experiences, but I think the show is designed like that from the get-go, and I am quite open with that. So I did relate to her a lot more so now compared to, 10, 12 years ago when I was in high school. So I've got to say mad props to Rita for biting that bullet and actually expressing her interest in Ryunosuke. And I know from experience that's difficult, because equally the fear of rejection and the fear of failure can stop you from even trying. Right? Because you think, what's the point? I'm going to get rejected. I'm going to get hurt. What's the point of me trying? And that can stop you. And for putting herself out there, you can clearly see that she's grown as a character. And I do want to say this thing to the audience. Even if you know you're going to fail at something, go for it. For one simple reason, because I think that the sort of inside feeling that you get of regret, that's going to eat you up a lot more than doing something and then it doesn't work out, right? Like if you like someone, for example, and we use that because this is a main example within the show. If you like someone, you need to go out and say, hey, I like you, because you'll regret it in the end, because you don't know that person's feelings. It's kind of like the guy that confessed to Aoyama. Even though he got rejected, right? He moved on from that point, but he felt like, I need to go and express my love to Aoyama. Or in the same case, right, where Aoyama is constantly in a situation where she can confess her love to Sorata, but she never does. At least officially in front of him. She'll always say something different, like, I really want to thank you for everything that you've done. And then as soon as he leaves, she'll say, and I also love you. So you can almost kind of imagine that level of regret that comes from that. And that's why I'm really proud of Rita as a character. And I must say, she really must love him, because she cherishes his emails, especially the Christmas one and the New Year's one. And she visited Japan for a day. Let's just think about this for a moment. She went to Japan for one day just to spend time with him on Valentine's Day. And in the end, she didn't get that time. So I really enjoy their relationship. I think it's real. Maybe it isn't, but I hope one day to kind of have that with someone. And I wrote a love heart right next to my note there. I know it's kind of sappy on my end, but that sort of relationship within this show, more than any other relationship, kind of gives me hope. It's very difficult as well. I just do want to mention this. This relationship, as well as others, made this anime very difficult for me to watch on Kunai. And I did want to bring this up. And Will, you know that we've kind of rescheduled this recording maybe like 5 times, right? But there is obviously a reason.
A bit.
We did do that. And I think maybe subconsciously, one of the reasons, of course, there was some stuff that kind of went on in the background, some personal stuff, but I think also one of the reasons I kind of almost dreaded doing the show for Kunai. I suggested it because in a sense, I wanted to bite that bullet, right? I wanted to finally talk about it because I feel as though if we don't, then we wouldn't be able to do other shows in the future like Toradora, which I do want to do. When watching it for Kunai, I had to stop numerous times because when I was in high school, rom-coms like this and Toradora gave me hope for the future. But now that I'm in the future, it kind of makes me depressed, right? It makes me really upset thinking that I wasted my youth and that I might just die alone. And I know it sounds a bit depressing, but I kind of feel like that with a lot of rom-coms. And I know back in the day when we started Kunai, I was kind of known as the rom-com guy because that's what I was watching back in the day, because those shows kind of gave me hope. And I think now, growing up, those shows just make me sad because it's like, I don't have that. I know it's a very selfish way of thinking, but like I mentioned, I am quite open on Kunai and I really wanted you guys to know that. And that's what I have to say about Rita.
I honestly, can concur with some of those thoughts and ideas and everything too. But, I do think that, series like this do kind of also still teach you that at least there always is hope.
Correct. And to be fair, there is. I'm just expressing my sort of anxieties almost in terms of preparing for the show.
Your doubts.
Yeah, exactly. My doubts in terms of preparing for the show. And one of the good things is that even despite all of that, I'm glad I did it. Because it's like I faced that fear head on. I faced that anxiety head on. It's almost like I did learn from the show not to give up. At least now, going into it, I had to stop, as I mentioned, because I was just getting really upset. But now I'm like, I'm ready to face anything head on because of the show and because of examples like Ryunosuke and Rita. And I think they're one of the most genuine relationships within the show. And I think it's often overlooked because of this whole love triangle between Aoyama and Sorata and Shiina. So yeah. I don't know if there's anything you want to say on Ryunosuke and Rita.
No, not really. The only thing that I will say, though, is like when you're talking about comparing like Rita and Aoyama too, is that you also have to keep in mind, Rita coming from a, Western culture, Western country and everything. And, like in England and in America and many, European countries, it's no big deal at all for a woman to sometimes be the more aggressive one or sometimes be the one to ask the guy out and everything. But it's not like that at all in Japan. Like it's this is one of the things when you talk about like the whole like not confessing, it's one of those things where it's always expected for the guy to be the one to confess first, which is kind of what makes Misaki stand out, how she just keeps saying I love you to Jin and everything. It's just not something that really happens over here.
And I get that. I think at the same time that didn't pop up in my head, and I think one of the main reasons is because of voice acting, because I've noticed that this show normally when you have a gaijin character or a foreign character to the anime, they give them a slight accent, right? Rita speaks perfect Japanese. The same with Aoyama, right? Aoyama is from Osaka, so you'd expect to have some level of Kansai accent or like speaking in Osaka Ben, right? She doesn't have an Osaka accent. So, and it's weird because when you swap over to the dub, which unfortunately High Dive does that every once in a while, when you go into a next episode, it will just revert back to dub, even though you set the settings to Japanese. But regardless, so I listened to the dub, Rita's voice, and she has, and this is something I have an issue with all of the characters in terms of dub, they sound like they're 50. Like every one of the characters, whether it's Aoyama, she sounds like an old lady. It's the same with Rita. Rita sounds like, I wrote this actually in my notes. I can't remember the name. It was a lady from The Weakest Link. I don't know if you remember that game show.
Yes, but are you talking about the host? The hostess,
yes, the host.
Say?
Her name is
the lady with the glasses.
Anne Robinson. You are the weakest link. Goodbye. So
that's what Rita sounds like in the dub?
Rita sounds like exactly like that in the dub. And I was like, I can't watch this. It's horrible.
God,
and
that's
Sorata,
funny.
and this is a funny thing. Sorata has less emotion in the dub than Shiina. And it's so weird. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I can't watch this in the dub. Straight away. Because, sometimes you're like, okay, it's the dub. I'm not bothered to change it. This straight away, I was like, you know what? I'm going to close the app, open it again, and see what goes on. It was horrible.
I don't want to dog on voice actors, for English dub voice actors and stuff like that, but I noticed that a lot mostly with male voice actors, and especially if they tend to be either younger or doing a younger voice. It goes one of two ways: either it's not enough emotion, or it's too much emotion that you're like, oh my god, is this dude emo?
And it was like that. Now, I'll be honest with you, not to slag off the dub, because I kind of think that the dub was made recently, because High Dive does this a lot. They'll take certain shows that were released tens of years ago, and they'll just give it a dub recently. Because I remember there wasn't an English dub when I was watching Sakurasou, so I think High Dive was producing this dub. I'd have to say one of the worst anime dubs of all time. I hate saying that. It kind of almost takes away the emotion behind the show. The emotional points have been reduced to zero. It was just horrible. But moving on, speaking of characters that are horrible, Sorata. I didn't think... Maybe you might think I didn't expect to say that, but I'm not really sure. I'm sorry, Will. I'm not really sure what to think about Sorata Kanda-kun. He's very caring and perceptive, taking care of most of the cast of characters, but he's clearly got some annoying traits, and this is one of the reasons I don't like him. He's almost way too passionate and emotional to the point where it gets destructive. For example, when he didn't pass the first game presentation and he gets angry at Shiina did not fucking deserve it. Yes, he's almost jealous of Shiina, but he didn't know how to deal with it, and especially someone who's effectively Sheena's caretaker or guardian or whatever you want to say. It seems like he's not respecting that role. It's like you wouldn't really do that otherwise. It feels as though he has that power and he's taking it out on someone who's clearly vulnerable, and she doesn't understand why he's angry, and she's just trying her best to sort of make him happy. It's pretty abusive. I don't like that. And as kind as he is, he's very childish as well, right? Despite being the voice of reason and responsibility in most of these scenarios. I'm not really happy at how oblivious he is. Clearly the whole Shiina and Aoyama, they both have feelings for him, but it takes him a while to recognize this. And furthermore, I don't think he really cares for Aoyama and the feelings he takes into consideration, because he's always taking care of Shiina. I kind of think as well that his character, and this is another reason I hate him, his character is kind of done dirty. Like he gets a lot of character development in the beginning where he's taking care of Shiina and he's like the caretaker, but towards the end, as Shiina grows as a character, he almost digresses, right? Like, I don't know, it's like their roles have reversed. It just seemed a bit weird. Like, you had all of this experience in learning about your classmates, right? Whether it's Aoyama or whether it's Shiina, and then you still let your emotions get the best of you towards the end of the show, despite the fact that you were very cool and calm and professional about it in the beginning. So I don't understand what has changed. He's just gotten very childish, and I that's one of the reasons I don't like him as a character, because you see more of that annoying baby side of him than you do the strong and confident person that he is in the very beginning.
I think you kind of nailed it at the very beginning of your description and talking about him, is that he's very emotional. Mm-hmm. That's what it all comes down to. He's just a very emotional person, and those emotions are what kind of like dictates his actions and stuff like that. And at the same time, I don't think he either A, realizes it, or B, means to be, kind of off-putting in those ways. It's just who he is and how it comes off.
I still think that's kind of shitty though, because he's done it on multiple occasions where he's...
I'm just going to say, just playing the other side of the coin and everything, you can definitely tell that he is still a caring person, that he means well. Like, just the fact that, like, one of the whole reasons why he ended up having to go to Sakurasou in the first place was trying to take in, the cats and rescue them and keep them safe and find new homes for them and things like that. And, and he had Aoyama even helping him with that. And like how he's always still, has all that self-doubt when he keeps looking at everyone else around him and saying, how talented they are, and he feels like he's like, I'm just a normal nobody type thing. So at the same time, it's like, I don't think he's as shitty of a person as you're making him out to be, but he's also, okay. But he's also not, the hero of this series.
The reason why I will double down and say he's shitty is because he's done the same bullshit with Shiina more than once, right? Where he gets jealous of Shiina and he gets angry and he sort of takes it out on her. He's done that at least twice in the show. How come he didn't learn from the first time? You know, like it kind of felt a bit
It's
overplayed, and I'm
it's
like,
probably
you're a dick.
also a slow burn of a series too. I don't even know how many volumes of the original light novel are out, but I know that the show. I'm sorry, I'm looking here now. There's technically 11 volumes of the light novel, and the anime adapted 6.
Exactly. So half of the story thereabouts.
Yeah. So we still don't even know how much more, growth or character development he could have had and everything.
I know. And okay, I'm not saying this because I know. I'm not basing it because of the events in the light novel. I'm just basing it off the events in one single year, because the anime takes place over 1 year, right? So in 1 year, how is it that you haven't learned between a couple of months of shouting and getting really angry at something that's not Sheena's fault, and something that you know that Sheena doesn't even fully understand while you're angry, and she's trying her best to sort of recover that?
We all mature and grow at different rates.
He hasn't matured.
I'm not saying that it's either good or bad. I mean, look at how some of my students that I have now that are third years, and they're going to be going into high school next year, and we're already talking about preparing for studying for tests and exams, all that stuff, how to get into high school. But I've got some of these kids that they still can't even answer questions of mine that I can ask to 10-year-olds that can answer my questions. We all we grow at different rates.
Okay, I get that, but I think we grow at different rates, but it's like he can't learn from such a big mistake. And the thing is, he says, "Oh, I've learned my lesson," and he does the same shit again. That's what kind of annoys me about him as a character.
You're describing being a human.
I know, but he's such a shitty. He's the main character. He's not supposed to be that shitty. Well, it almost feels
again. This goes back to how when we very first started this discussion, how this series itself defies a lot of those expectations, a lot of those tropes when it comes to these types of shows.
I get it, but at the same time, it's almost as if he's a harem protagonist. It kind of felt like that, even though.
Definitely. I agree with that, and he's dense, especially when it comes to the relationships. Not even his own relationships, but the relationships of other people around him.
Exactly. And speaking of relationships, well, I want to know your opinions on Aoyama, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to take a guess, because this is the episode where we're bringing back ships. I have a feeling that you are one of those people that are like, oh yeah, Sorata needs to be with Aoyama. Am I right in saying that?
Oh, no, not at all. No, my whole thing is I think that Aoyama is quote-unquote best girl, but do I want her with Sorata?
Okay.
No.
Best girl, I would have assumed that you would have said that. Okay. Interesting.
No, so I say this all the time, when it comes to shows like this, just because I have a best girl, a character that I like the best, I don't think that they should be, I mean, not always. Sometimes, yes, I think they should be together and I ship them. Other times, no, it's not always the case. For instance, with quintessential quintuplets, my favorite character is Nino. Now, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't finished the anime, but like me, I read the manga, and I'm perfectly fine with how the manga ended.
So, you mean Miku, right? Not Mino.
No.
You mean
Miku can
Miku, right?
Go jump off a cliff for all I care.
I haven't seen that anime, but I see all the memes online. So Miku, best girl. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I want to know your opinions on Aoyama, because I don't actually have much notes for her, and I really wanted to know what you say.
No, she's just honestly, I mean, I am a simple guy when it comes to not just anime characters, but characters in my media and stuff like that. And Aoyama is kind of almost like an atypical character that I really like, because of the fact that she's your I don't want to say it, make this sound derogatory, but I imagine her how she could be later in life, being your quote unquote happy little homemaker. Mm-hmm. How she does she likes to look out for people, but she wants to succeed in her own regards too. How she can cook and she can clean, and like how she looks after other people and all that type of stuff too. Like that's like, and it shows how she, every time you turn around, you find out that she's working another part-time job somewhere because she's like trying to support herself, you know, to get through school and follow her own dreams and everything. And how she's constantly supporting Sorata, you know, through all the stuff that he's going through. And every time that, you know, he turns around and he's looking for help, she's like always there. He always knows that he can call on her. Or there's been times during the series where like they're trying to get something done and he's like, oh, I know, let's go find Aoyama, she'll be able to help with this.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I wouldn't say it's a wrong thing to think that, because even Sorata's mum kind of alludes to the fact that she is kind of very quote unquote traditional Japanese housewife in the sense of how she is and how she acts, and having that sort of motherly figure. It's a very interesting idea, and I do respect that she continues to move forward. She has that goal in mind. She's willing to stand up to her parents and say, look, I'm gonna go and make it up on my own. I don't need you guys. I'm gonna get my dream. And yes, there are moments in which she does have a breakdown, but I think she's a much better character than Sorata, in my opinion. I will say this, I do feel bad for her a lot, because it's almost as if her plot points are the most dramatic in this show, and I love that, but I'm like I feel bad for her. It's like everything bad just happens to her, and it's like, okay, can we see anything else happen? You know, I really want her to succeed.
Like the whole time I'm watching the show, I'm like, damn it, can we just see Aoyama happy once? And it's like the only time that we even really get to see her even like, I would say, somewhat happy is like the episode where she's on the back of the bike riding with Sorata, and they're rushing to get her to her speaking audition and voice recording test and all that type of stuff, and like she sneaks in the little like, you know, I love you, but it's just like in one of those passing conversations like you brought up earlier, but she's just like leaning against him as he's pedaling the bike and is just like in bliss. I'm like, oh my god.
Do you
it's
think
so heartbreaking
that she meant that? I have a feeling that she secretly meant that.
Oh, she totally meant it. She 100% meant it then.
It's like, I know that there's a lot of discussions in terms of Aoyama, and I know she's the best girl and even favorite character of a lot of people, and they want her to be shipped with Sorata, and I personally think Sorata does not deserve her at all. She deserves someone who can reciprocate that love, because at the end of the day, she's a very loving person, and I personally think Sorata's a dickhead, and I don't think that they're a compatible match, because he constantly, like, he's so oblivious, because he's always, you know, taking care of Shiina, and there's at points even on Christmas, right? In Japan, Christmas is a very sort of romantic time. You see a lot of young couples go out together, and the fact that he left her, like, he just straight up just was like, fuck it, I'm gone, I'm gonna go and find Shiina. I get it, you can argue it's because he has to take care of Shiina, but he constantly is like, he just leaves without saying anything, and I think that's a bit fucked up. I
concur.
I'm sorry, Will. I know a lot of people are going to hate me for saying that. It's also interesting as well. I know we're not really supposed to talk about light novel on Kunai, but it is interesting to know, and this is spoilers for the light novel, because I don't want anyone to kind of waste their time with it. They don't get together. And a lot of people are annoyed by the fact that Sorata and Aoyama don't get together. I'm happy that they don't, my personal opinion. But do you know who does get together, Will?
Well, I'm assuming, you know, Rita and Yosuke.
No, they don't.
Really?
Yeah, because the light novel sort of has a glimpse of 5 years into the future from the point of graduation. So at this point, they would have even graduated university, right? So they don't. She's still chasing after him.
Well, she's still going. Okay, but at least there's still that. At least they still have something.
But they're not
going.
dating.
I mean, and then of course, you know, Jin and Misaki. But I mean, they're together by the end of the anime.
Correct. And Mashiro and Sorata end up dating, and that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about Mashiro.
Oh, I already freaking saw that bullshit coming.
And I'm sorry, they fucked.
I mean, who else was gonna date her? I mean, who else was gonna take care of?
They fuck as well. In volume 9, it's implied that they have sex. Some crazy shit. I don't know what to think about. I don't even know what to think about that, in my personal opinion. But you know, because I don't think
like,
Sorata deserves
isn't that
love,
like
man.
technically like, you know, someone like taking advantage?
I don't know what to think of that. I think she progresses a lot as a character. But I don't know. I think it's just a bit weird. You know, it just seems a bit
like here's the thing. Like I wrestle with this with myself all the time. Like I said, I love this show. I really do. Like I said, this is like the fourth time I've watched it through now. And the thing is, like, I really like Mashiro as a character. I really do. I really enjoy her, and like I like what little bit of like kind of growth that she gets in the series and how she kind of helps some of the other characters, especially Sorata, kind of like wake up a little bit. But at the same time, it's like the whole situation around her and him is so goddamn annoying.
Their dynamic is not good either, in my opinion, and it kind of leads me on into what I think about Mashiro. Mashiro is actually my favorite character in the show, and back in the day, I didn't quite notice it because I'm just enjoying the show, right? But it seems to be the case that she's on the spectrum, that she could potentially be autistic or neurodivergent. I'm not a doctor and I'm not a medical professional, and you know, Sensei does mention to Sorata to take care of her and to be responsible for her, first of all. She also mentions that the Sakura dorms would be better fit for her, and I can imagine it's due to Mashiro's lack of social skills and basic life skills. It's even reflected in her living space because it's very dirty, and when you meet her for the first time, she's indeed unable to dress herself in the mornings, and this is something that I imagine Rita would have taken care of in England, right? You can also see this in her manga from episode 1. She is fantastic at drawing, however, she doesn't know how to develop a love story properly because she's never gone through that, possibly once again due to lack of structure or a lack of experience and knowledge on how a romance develops. It's a common trope with mangaka characters in anime, right? Initially, Sorata blames her behavior on the fact that she's from England and that there might be some cultural differences. As a Brit, I can assure you guys that we're not sleeping completely naked after taking a bath, and we know how to put our underwear on in the morning. It is interesting though, as Sorata at the end of episode 1 says, "In the spring, I met a pure white girl." Obviously, the translation is a bit off, but I think he's referring to her innocence as a character, right? She's almost incredibly childlike in that sense, and she's not fully aware. She requires constant attention and care as well. Another thing I wanted to mention, that in episode 2, Sorata sets up a dorm meeting regarding Mashiro, stating that she's a little bit different and she's not capable of living a normal life. Sensei does mention that her parents requested that someone takes care of her, so one can assume that her parents or Rita did this for her in England. Yeah, I think it's interesting because at the beginning of the show, it's almost as if she's a burden, but she doesn't really see this, because it's weird, because it's like Sorata clearly feels that she's a burden initially, but she doesn't see it, and instead of opting in that he's a nice person and she seeks his friendship, because she's like, okay, he's dealing with me, I almost have to, I'm obliged to be his friend. And I think her and her condition might make it difficult to form friendships and personal relationships. So she's oblivious to her surroundings and the consequences to her actions. You know, the fact that she's eating Baumkuchen, the cakes, without even paying for it, and she's eating it in the store in front of the cashiers, right? Fun fact, actually, as well, this is how I found out about Baumkuchen. It's actually one of my favorite cakes because of this show. And I'll be honest,
funny.
it's a bit weird, isn't it? I've loved it since 2012.
I figured that like in don't you have like Baumkuchen like easily in England?
We do not. The German bakeries don't.
Really?
Yes, the German bakeries have the German style of it. There's one Japanese bakery that sells Baumkuchen, but they don't sell the small ones. They sell it as a whole big cake, and it's like £20. It's super expensive.
The giant ones, yeah.
And it's because it gets made.
Okay, I get it.
It gets made in Japan and sent overnight to the UK. It's insane, super expensive. And I wanted to mention, although I don't have autism or ADD, I do relate to Mashiro a lot as a character. I can recall a time in my life where I felt like her, right? Failing to understand social cues, how to have conversations with people outside of my own social circle. And oddly enough, going back to the whole podcast, it really helped me with that, right? The podcast helped me with that. I think it was caused initially because I was becoming more and more like a hikikomori every day due to trauma from bullying and in high school. It's interesting as well how Mashiro tries to communicate, but at sometimes the wrong words come out, right? A perfect example of this is when she says, "I'm glad Sorata was my first." And that kind of brings up some very comedic moments, and Aoyama and Sorata sort of get the wrong idea because she doesn't provide context. And, you know, you get Nanami, she's panicking. She was like, well, did you basically, you know, take her virginity and whatnot? She was like panicking and shit. She was like, whoa, this is a bit, you know, you're a pervert, that kind of stuff.
I will say that's been one of my difficulties with this show in general, is that it's almost like got like a switch.
Yeah.
Like, I still remember the first time that I watched the show, and like every episode for like the first half of the series, I'm just busting out laughing, you know, and I'm like, there's still some lines from the show that I quote for, you know, to this day, and there's like memes out there of the show and everything. But then it's like, then the second half, it's like such a bummer, dude, so much of it.
And in a way, that's not good story structure, because you almost want to build it up gradually from the beginning. And as you said, it feels like they just turned on the switch, and it's just like sometimes
or
it
at
wants
least
to be
mix it up. Like at least in the second half, when there are the bumming times, there are little bits of comedy and happiness to break it up. But to me, it's not enough. I think like if that's the route that the author originally wanted to go, it should have been like interspersed a little bit better pace in those regards to having your haha moments and your oh no boo hoo moments. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I completely agree with you on that. They should have just dispersed it, as you said. It makes for a better show. And I kind of think, yes, it kind of comes to this discussion on whether they should follow the source material one-to-one. I do think they can take some certain liberties in terms of slightly changing, not necessarily the structure of the story, but in terms of where they place the jokes in. I think that would have been a better place for JC Staff to kind of take care of. But back on to Mashiro, she does grow quite a bit throughout the show, and it's evident from episode 17, the Valentine's Day episode, where she dresses herself in the morning. She remembers that Sorata loves the bamboo shoots, the chocolate, so she gets him a box, right? It's a very small gesture because she's not really aware enough to kind of get him a fancy sort of Valentine's Day chocolate, because a lot of people make chocolate during that time, or they'll get like fancy boutique or something specific Valentine's Day themed. She just clearly went to Konbini and got the bamboo shoot biscuit chocolate things, but it's because she recognized that he liked them. He mentioned that when they were on their way to Fukuoka, right? So it was that, the fact that she remembers, and the fact that she's sweet enough to do these things because she knows that it would please him as a friend. She does follow some kudere traits, I will say this, but I wouldn't class her as a kudere because many a time she has proven that she is capable of showing emotion, and a lot of kudere characters don't. So that's all I have to say around Mashiro. She is one of my favorites just because she's just a great character. I don't know how to explain it. Like, she's just so sweet, and I think she can't do anything wrong. And I don't know, as a character, you really do get to learn a lot from her. How to deal with people, how to deal with social interactions. And I think it's helped me a lot as well, because there are a lot of people that I know that I can't have social interactions with. And I think, you know, seeing how she deals with it, I can kind of sort of implement that in my own life. So as a character, she has been very inspirational to me in the past. Not so much now, because I've kind of learned how to deal with those scenarios better, but at least back in the day, she was very helpful in sort of teaching me that lesson.
As I was saying earlier, like she's a really difficult character for me personally, because like you know, I think she's really sweet, even though like you say, she doesn't really show a whole lot of emotion until things get later. But then like as you kind of learn why, and kind of how like she like it's funny. I one of the scenes that stuck out to me a lot was when they went and they saw the painting. I can't remember exactly where they went, but they saw the painting, and come to find out it was actually one of her paintings and everything. And it did that kind of like dreamy sequence where it showed the painting, but then it showed her like in front of it, and she was wearing like a dress, like what you would wear like if you were having a showing at an art gallery kind of thing. And it's almost like people in her life were putting her on display as much as they were the art. Like she's just been treated as like another object this whole time, just as much as her creations had been. So like it was just really sad to me, and it's like I really want to like be more supportive of her as a character and everything, but the situations that she has been put into are of no fault of her own. It's just really annoying. Like the whole thing with where you're talking about like people wanting to ship, you know, Sorata and Aoyama together. Well, that couldn't even happen once, you know, Mashiro came into picture, because he was having to spend so much time with her that it kind of becomes inevitable. When you're spending that much time with a person, you're probably going to end up developing some type of feelings one way or another. So that was kind of like a wedge that was thrown into that potential relationship in the first place. And that's one of the reasons that like this show, that even as much as I like it, I can't ever give it like a perfect rating. Like even upon this viewing, I even dropped my personal rating down. Like I use Anime Planet, and they do a star rating, and I had this at a 4.5 star. And I'm like, you know what? I'm dropping it down to a 4 just on that aspect alone.
Okay, interesting. Personally, I do agree with you on that point. I also think that she's constantly being taken advantage of as a character.
Absolutely.
You know, whether it is from her family, the school, her parents, Rita even, or Sorata. I think we kind of forget about that a lot, especially because everyone is shipping Sorata and Mashiro, but Sorata is taking advantage of her in some way or form.
And that's why I just keep reiterating. It's like, I really like Mashiro. I really do like her. And that's why I don't want people to think that I don't when I say stuff like this. I just hate the situation that she's put in and that her being there has created in this series.
I completely agree with you. That being said, we're going to move on to openings and endings and sort of make our way throughout the end of the show. So, Will, I want to know your opinions on the OPs and the ending.
I'm trying to remember here now. I think it's what it is I like the first opening better, but the second ending better, I think is what it was. You have to forgive me since I took my notes down. I can't remember where I wrote it at now, and because as we were talking earlier, we had some issues getting around to recording this show, so I can't find I know that I wrote down about the openings and endings, but where did I put it? I know I written it down, but I'm almost positive that I like the first opening, but the second ending I think are the ones that I actually like the most of them all, because halfway through it changes. So you start with the opening one and ending one, and then when it gets to the second half of the season, they both change.
I kind of disagree with you a little bit, because I think I'm a big fan of opening one and ending one. So because of the show is longer running, you do have 2 sets of openings and 2 sets of endings. So in fact, Sakurasou actually had 3 openings and 2 endings, because they used one of the endings as an opening for the first episode. They all slap, in my opinion. I do think that the first OP, Kimi ga Yume no Sureta Kita, is honestly nostalgic for me. It's transporting me back to 2012. However, as a result, it gets really emotional for me. I remember that difficult time in my life and how the shows in this era sort of helped me out. I wasn't really a big fan of the second OP. It wasn't as iconic, and I often kind of skipped it. The visuals were great though. It felt out of place because at this point, the anime was getting really dramatic, and I kind of wanted a high OP. So I kind of felt like the first opening and ending should have been at the end, so the second half of the show, and then the second should be at the first half of the show. So it was kind of forgetful in my opinion. But what wasn't forgetful was the first ending, which is Days of Dash. One of the best anime endings of all time. Truly the GOAT, in my personal opinion.
I was just double checking, and for me, no, it's definitely the second ending.
Okay. All right, cool. All right.
Hey, honestly, I can get down with any of them. I don't think any of them are terrible. I really like the second ending.
Okay, each to their own. It's hard and difficult to describe, but Days of Dash was so emotional and impactful, and you can really feel it in Konomi Suzuki's voice. And in fact, that this is one of those anime endings that I kind of keep it in rotation in my Spotify playlist. And with how strong the first opening and ending was, in my opinion, I wish they would have kept it for after episode 13 for the whole anime. And that's what I said. I just think they should have just stuck with one. But back then, at least when you had an anime that went on for that long, you did have a second opening and ending. And that's, with whether it's Chunibyo or Heneko or even Toradora, you kind of had that. It was kind of par for the time, I guess. Can we talk about voice acting? Because I don't have much to say about it.
Sure.
I did some research, and the show is chock-a-block full of legendary seiyuu.
Oh yeah, dude. I was when we were gonna when we first were gonna kick off this episode, I was gonna talk a little about that, the voice acting talent behind the show. It's funny, how we've had a few shows here lately, of our past episodes where I was like, dude, did you know about this voice that was in this? It's no, I didn't even know about it until I was looking into it. This is one of those shows.
And I don't know if it's just down to JC staff, because they always get some insane voice actors to work on it, or if it's the case that a lot of these voice actors were a lot greener and they may have been newer to voice acting, but when looking at it, they've already been established voice actors. For example, Ayako Kawasumi, Megumi Toyoguchi, Takahiro Sakurai, the voice of Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, Ai Kayano, the voice of Darkness in Konosuba and the voice of Rin in New Game, as well as my favorite seiyuu of all time, Yui Hori, who's been in almost every anime from 2000 until modern day. She's played Ida in Rail Wars, Koko in Golden Time, Chie Satanaka in Persona 4, Toru in Fruits Basket, as well as Minorin in Toradora, and she also did music for Golden Time and Toradora, opening and endings. But back on the point of JC staff, it seems that in this era, they really get the best voice actors. I think they must have had a high budget for voice acting. And one thing to mention is that the dub came in 2020, which I think was a bit weird because it was almost 8 years from the initial release. And it made me think that why is High Dub dubbing it again? Is there some sort of resurgence that's coming?
I thought, so while we were talking earlier, it's not High Dive that dubbed it. It was Sentai Filmworks did it.
Yeah,
they
isn't
hired the dub cast.
But what I'm saying is, isn't
2020.
Isn't High Dive part of Sentai?
Oh, you know what? I think you're right. I think Sentai does own them. You're right. My bad.
It's all right. It's all right.
My bad. You're right.
It kind of made me think, because they've done it with a lot of anime as well during COVID. They were just like dubbing a lot of their older shows. And I kind of think it's because High Dive doesn't have as many anime to begin with on their roster. So they kind of have to make the most of it and just produce dubs to get more people to, unfortunately, that's just how it is.
It's a smart idea, though, too, because, you then get those people who, I don't know why, but will refuse to watch subs. So you're taking your existing product and able to get it out there into a different market.
And it's great, and I get it. I just want to know, though, that because of that dub, I know it's going to bring a lot more people in, even though it's not the best dub. Do you think we're going to get like a resurgence in this show? Because like we mentioned before, this first season, or this only season, covers 6 volumes of manga, which is literally half of the show. The manga ended in 2014, the anime ended in 2013, so they had at that point already hit the source material. So that kind of makes me want to think, considering that we've got Mao-sama 10 years after season 1, same with Fruits Basket, we waited ages for the remake of Fruits Basket. There is this sort of idea of anime getting remade constantly. Do you think we're gonna get a second season of the show, considering this sort of fake resurgence?
And I'm not meaning this in a derogatory way, but I don't think that this series has the kind of like lineage as those others. True. And I just mean that in a way is where like they still sell like even their books and stuff like that, which like I can't even tell you like in the almost 7 years that I've been over here if I've ever even seen the Sakurasou books on the shelf in a bookstore anywhere, because the light novel section in most bookstores is generally right next to the manga section, and I can usually pick out series that I know and recognize, and I don't even think I've seen it in the bookstores. So I'm sure it's probably still in production, or you can still get them brand new, but comparing it to something like Mao-sama, where it's like it's still a steady seller even to this day, and that's one of the reasons why they decided to put out more anime. They did put out the anime with a different studio and go a cheaper route, but at the same time can kind of understand with it being so long between seasons. So I won't ever say never. I'm not that type of person, but I think the chances of it are even lower than we ever thought for something like Mao-sama.
Okay, that's interesting, because I would have agreed with you. Personally, I didn't know at the time when watching it initially, I didn't know that, that there wasn't going to be more light novel or whatever. I didn't know. I wasn't aware of that. I don't want to see a second season because I think it's very self-contained. We already kind of know what's happening. All of the plot points are tied off. I find it weird that they introduce characters at the end of a season as well. It was the same sort of issue that I had with K-On! Of the fact that they introduced characters right at the end of a season. I hate that in anime. But I'm looking at the ending, and here I know we talk about spoilers, so I'm going to spoil it for those. Looking at the ending, it suffers from a similar sort of ending as Haganai. You know how like Haganai season, like the proposed season 3 would have been like a fucked up storyline and no one would have liked it. Apparently no one really likes the ending of Sakurasou, and basically anything past Jin and Misaki going off to university, which I get. Clearly Aoyama confesses her love, she gets rejected flat out, and then he ends up with Mashiro. And oddly enough, it becomes more of a harem. And there was another character that I mentioned before in the beginning, Kana, one of the first year students. She also falls in love with Sorata, and the show becomes like.
See, honestly though, you know what I really wanted, like, well, I won't say I really wanted to see it, but the only reason not the only reason, a big reason I wouldn't mind seeing more, because I doubt I'll ever read the books, but honestly, a lot of people I'm sure don't like her, think she's annoying and everything, but I would love to have actually seen more of Yuko, his younger sister.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting.
And
Why is
like,
that?
because I love the deal where like every time like he would have like another girl around, she's like, oh my god, you're bringing another girl home.
Okay.
And like she admitted to having a bit of a brother complex and everything, but I think it was more like, you know, more in a funny way, not like she was really in love with her brother. I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought she was really cute and funny and just added a nice little. It's like, how do I put this? It's like if you got a salt shaker and you find one piece of pepper in it, she'd be that piece of pepper.
Okay, I get you. That makes sense. All right, interesting perspective on Yuko. I don't really like her, but fair enough. I get it.
See, I'm sure most people don't like her, but I did. I thought she was adorable.
Okay, all right. And I think we kind of mentioned our gripes and grumbles throughout. I think that was a great episode. I want to know, Will, what's your overall sort of opinion on the show? Would you recommend it to someone, and who would you recommend it to? Because you've already mentioned your overall score and the reasons why you're giving that, but would you recommend it to someone?
I would definitely recommend it to people, you know, and I feel like it's kind of a cop-out because, like, I think I've mentioned this with almost any show that we've covered. It's not going to be a show that I'm going to recommend to anybody and everybody. Like, if I know someone is your typical shonen bro, there's no way in hell I'm ever going to recommend the show, not even as a gateway to rom-com, because I think some of the subject matter and story matter is a bit too much for something like that. But if I know someone is already into series like this, you know, they like, doesn't even have to be rom-com, but someone that might be into slice of life, but they're even looking for something a little bit different, I definitely recommend this, you know, out to somebody like that. So yeah, I mean, overall I would recommend it, but again, I would kind of have to get a feel for what other people are into and what they're already have been watching.
Okay, interesting. I also kind of agree with you. I wouldn't recommend this to shonen bros, and I wouldn't recommend it to people who are starting off anime, especially people who are starting off in rom-com, because of the topic of discussion as you mentioned, but because it's just high drama. I think if you want to get into rom-com, start off with a show like Heneko and kind of work your way through. I think that would be perfect. This show, I think I wouldn't say watch this show before something like Toradora. I think maybe watch a show like Toradora, because this show is just way too dramatic, to the point where I kind of think it would be kind of successful as, like, you know, like if a K-drama sort of adapted it in a similar way to the famous manga Boys Over Flowers kind of got adapted into a K-drama. I have a feeling that a Korean drama for this show would be excellent, and I'd love to see that, but just because of how dramatic it can be. I do enjoy the show. It's one of my personal favorites, I will say that, and being critical of it kind of almost made me love it a little bit more. I don't think I'm gonna ever watch this show again. I'm glad we did cover it on Kunai, but even when I was watching it initially, Toradora I've seen like maybe almost 20 times at this point, but this show I've only watched it twice, and the second time was for Kunai. So yeah.
Oh dang!
Yeah, which is insane.
The way that you talked about it with me before, I could have sworn you'd seen it more than that. So like I said, this was my fourth time. I'll probably watch it again in another, 5 years from now.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, that being said, big thanks to our sponsors Crunchyroll and Sugoimon. In addition to that, if you want to watch this anime, you can watch it on High Dive. They're not sponsored, but we do like to support the legal viewing of anime. So you can watch this in sub or in dub on High Dive, and you can also support us on our Twitter page, which is @GalPodcast. Same, we've changed all of our Twitters. I believe Will as well. You're in the process of changing your Twitter page, right?
So I still can't get my @ so my @ is still @YamStarch, but then my name, you know how you can set your name different than your @ is YamSensei. If you Google search either YamStarch or YamSensei, I'll be the one that comes up.
And gradually you're going to change that across everything else, I'd imagine, as well.
Yeah, slowly but surely.
Cool. Also, be sure to join our Discord, where we will be discussing the show in more detail. We'll be opening a thread for this. At the moment, we have a thread open for Assassination Classroom, but as we kind of do more kunai episodes, we'll be opening threads so that you guys can kind of make your suggestions within the Discord. In addition to that, you can also make them on Spotify. There will be a little Q&A that comes up where you can suggest directly, and we'll be taking your suggestions into consideration. I think at the moment we have 4 anime suggestions from the audience, so shout out to the audience members there.
And I will say too, definitely, like, you know, it's not just an anime Discord. I mean, we talk about all kinds of stuff on there.
Yeah, we talk about gaming,
lots of different
food,
pop culture topics.
It's basically a Discord for the network. So anything that we cover on any of the Gal Network podcasts, it will be in the Discord. But we've separated it and we've organized it in a way that depending on what you like, there is something for you. And Will, care to announce the next episode?
I do believe it is supposed to be Chivalry of a Failed Knight, if I recall.
It is, you're right.
Very fun show. It's definitely going to be something that I definitely am looking forward to hearing your takes on, because I know it's not something that you usually watch.
Okay.
And there's going to be one character in particular that I can't wait, because you're probably going to hate it.
Okay, all right. You're
not the show, but the character.
But the character. Okay, all right. I'm trying to figure out where you can watch it, to be fair. Let me see.
Let me take a look here.
Oh, you know what? I think it's on High Dive.
Yeah, it should be on High Dive because it is a Sentai show.
Yeah, because it's been taken off Crunchyroll. So yeah, once again, we're watching it. It happens to be on High Dive, so we're gonna watch it on High Dive. High Dive, if you are listening, we'd appreciate a sponsorship. That's what I'm gonna say. Okay, all right, we love you guys, so make sure that you guys check it out on High Dive. And yeah, that being said, bye guys.
Bye.